Another week into the A Lawless Time Meta, and we have another great community-run tournament. We're here tonight to talk about the Cantina Clash from McClunky Gaming, and we're going to break down the meta, talk about some really interesting deck lists, the winners, the losers, and then after that, we're going to make some meta predictions. I'm Jordan from the Colorado Cantina crew, joined by my teammates, Kyle and Sharkey, but tonight we also have a special guest, Mickey D, coming in. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me, guys. Love the show. I watch every week when I can. Happy to hop on, talk the meta, and shoot the crap with everybody.
Yeah, really pumped. This is I'll have you know, first non-team return guest to the channel. We did that Thrawn video a couple months ago, so making history. You have to catch up. Everybody else be like, I want to catch up more. So good stuff there. Yeah, this weekend we ended up doing, both of us, commentary on the Cantina Clash.
Yes.
Before I was scheduled to do commentary, I reached out to you and said, hey, like, you'll be watching these games. Let's get some insight on the meta. Next week, we're going to have Alex Krez from Blue Milk Gaming join us. He's going to be at Adepticon. So we're going to get a really good look at all of these events leading up to the first week of PQs, which I think is just a great way to get things started. Sharky, what's up with you? How was your weekend?
That sounds great. My weekend was great. I played hockey all day today, but I did get to watch a little bit, of the tournament yesterday and some this morning. But...
Yeah, and Kyle, what's up with you?
Well, all this Cantina talk's working out for me because I was pounding margaritas at Casa Bonita with the kids this weekend, so it was a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all had good weekends, and so was Swoo. Like, we had another team event. We all love the team events. I was bummed I couldn't be there. We've all competed at Beatle in the past, and that was day one. Day two was just a solo premier constructed event, all streamed by McClunky. You go check it out on their channel after you watch this one. So. Let's just start with the team event, right? We see Pasquale's fan club. That's the McClunky team with Tyler, Dayhawk, and Spanish Alex. They took it down. They faced KTOD in the finals, and that was the first McClunky win. I think it was out of 3 tries in that 3v3. So really cool to see. The KTOD decks were Stevie on Luke Data Vault, Tada on Vel Red, and then Woo on Talzin Red. Mickey, out of that group, what's the one standout that you would like to talk about?
I think so. There's a couple ways to look at it here. Like, I think Luke Data Vault's kind of the obvious one. That's seems like a baseline for the meta right now. Maybe like the vanilla pick going into a tournament, number one most expected representation, Luke. I think that's a reasonable choice. Talzin is an interesting one as well because like we see it in yellow most often, but red here as a choice is interesting. But I think the most interesting deck here is that Vel Red, because it's kind of taking that Jin Urso deck shell, which is a deck, if you look at the chart here, that was represented, but and was in the finals and stuff, but taking that shell of cards, the aggressive negotiations, the Chiao Fan, the Honas, all those good blue-red cards that came out in A Lawless Time, and pairing it with that super aggressive ability with Vel to add experience counters, which can impact a race, as well as the super powerful credit haters, stuff like Arvel Skeen and Galen Urso to either defeat the credits and get bonuses or blank the credits, or in combination, give your opponent a bunch of credits while they're blanked, and then land an Arvel Skeen and just start mowing away at the credits. So I think that's a really potent strategy and a really cool deck to see, this shell, but in a different style.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see Lando, another credit deck that really was showcased this week, and probably the coming out party for Lando, realistically. We saw Tada and Tyler from McClunky play in the finals in that matchup. I think we're at the point with those two decks where we need to talk at least about sideboard credit hate, right, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're going to see credit hate in your 60. The question to answer is going to be, what's the best credit hate? What do you want to run? In my experience so far, I thought targeted crate, like an Arvel Skeen, makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of good red decks. You can fit him in. The challenge with it, though, is it only pops 1 credit, right? And a lot of the Landos, I'll pop their credit going into their flip turn, and then they'll just make another one and still do their thing, right? So really, it's trying to turn them all off with Galen that I found to be a little more effective, but you have to protect Galen, right? So it's not only get Galen, but also keep him somewhere safe so that you can keep those credits off.
Sharky, what's your favorite meta removal to use right now for credits?
My favorite one is going to stick with Arvel, mostly because I've been playing a lot of red decks. But I do think expanding the options or ideas outward is something that every deck is going to have to do. Whether you're running blue or green, having trouble coming up with other colors that actually do it. You may just have to splash it might even be worth a splash, actually, in hindsight, of splash base to try to bring in some of the credit hate in similar ways that I've seen some people do with the upgrades. So at some point, we're going to run into a saturation problem where you can't have an answer to everything, and it may just be beat them in other ways. But my favorite one is currently the red style.
Yeah, Mickey, what about you?
I think I agree with Kyle that Galen is probably my favorite here because it also does splash damage into stuff like aggressive negotiations. You can just blink the aggressive negotiations. So they were planning to they claim early to get that aggressive pump off. You have 4 resources left behind. Turn off the aggressive, and now their lethal plan goes out the window. But I do want to give a shout out to Lieutenant Gorn and Yellow Heroism because while it's a little slow, and I don't think it's as effective credit hate just because it doesn't do the hate when played, just being a 3-cost 4/4 is enough to see play in main decks, even if your opponent isn't playing credits. So it's a more main deckable piece of credit hate.
Yeah, I think prior to this weekend, I likely would have said Arvel as well. But post this weekend, I think I'm in the Galen camp for sure. The plot ability, whether you're doing it main board or side, I think what's really interesting is that, to Kyle's point, it's not just about one credit right now. It's like the ability to create credits moving forward and that dance back and forth. We saw quite a bit of that in the mirror final today in the solo event with Lando v Lando, where there was a Gorn on one side, a Gorn on the other. It was, are you going to activate first? Are we going to trade into each other? A lot of really interesting plays there for sure. This is the meta breakdown that we have on screen from day one, the team event. So obviously, it represents a lot of what people are thinking about in the meta, but it is a team format, a little bit of a different strategy. You could protect some decks. And I'll be honest, as I was commentating yesterday, one of my questions as I was interviewing Tyler after their team won was, hey, do you think that Lando is good enough into a wide field right now, or do you think that you got protected by some of the other matchups being hidden, some of those aggressive matchups? And he was like, absolutely. Most of the time I was the one that was protected. I was the one that was sitting there getting my preferred matchup. But today we saw that play out with a lot of resilience, whether it's hyperspace disaster, bow coming in or whatever. So definitely need to be on the lookout for Lando moving forward. Sharkey?
Yeah.
Work on.
Yeah, so looking at this meta breakdown here, the one thing I wanted to point out, Mickey started with saying, hey, it's Luke being the kind of vanilla deck going in. I think I saw it a little bit differently. Having played in the Beatle events previously, it looked to me like the deck you're going to use to target something, right? We've talked about it previously. If I want to target a space deck, who does a really good job there? Well, Luke does, right? With his inherent ability, a lot of the cards you have in the deck between Blue Leader and a lot of different ways to shoot down other ships. It really felt to me like Luke was brought as the deck to eat somebody's deck, right? The other team might have a space deck. I want to eat it with this. And I think that kind of played out going into day 2, right? Because there was only one Luke and it didn't go well for that Luke, right? So it definitely seems more effective in the team format than it did in the solo format this weekend.
Yeah, Mickey, I see you shaking your head about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Vader for Pilot used to occupy a similar space. That was kind of the theory behind it in way back in the regional in set 4 in Minnesota, where if you expect a room full of space decks, just be the best space deck in the room, and that was Vader 4. Unfortunately for Vader, and it was on that chart, it was one of the more played decks in the 3v3 environment, but it folds to Luke decks. And so I think part of why Vader was high on that list is an interesting part about the team composition is I remember when commentating in round 1, one of the teams decided to go all 3 space decks. They played a Luke, they played a Boba, they played a Vader, just all the pilot leaders. And I think that could be part of why the Luke was so high. Either you wanted a deck full of pilot decks, or you wanted at least one pilot deck on your roster, and Luke is kind of probably the safest choice of those 3.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Let's bring up this Vel Red deck that we mentioned previously. Kind of similar to that Jin Shell like we talked about. We're running a 30 HP base here. Maybe a little bit more removal than some Jin builds with Knowledge and Defense, as well as True Remembers and Lost and Forgotten main. But overall, just a really, really solid mid-range pile here. One card that really stood out to me this weekend that just saw a ton of play, and a little bit in London as well, was Hona, man. That 3/5 raid 2 restore is just huge, Sharky.
Yeah, Hona's showing up everywhere, even in my decks. I'm like, it might even be worth a splash in some cases, and I'm definitely using it as a splash. 3/5 restore 2 with raid 2 is massive in a lot of cases, especially for 4.
Really represents a huge swing. Mickey, when you look at this list, how do you think a deck like this tries to compete with space? Is that something that you think Vel needs to be concerned about, or as we're looking forward to what's next, is it taking a look at saying like, damn, like I might get out credited with Lando here as we're trying to move forward?
Yeah, so you saw, I believe Todd was on stream against the space deck, Boba, I believe, in round 2 of the team event. And those 3 Corellian Hounds in the sideboard kind of speak to the game plan of you just race the space decks.
Yeah.
With Hona, a big card being that's a 7 HP life swing, dealing 5 to their base and healing 2. And if they're not respecting the ground, just punish them for it. Punch them in the face for 5. Aggressive Negotiations allows you to do early claims, and a lot of these space decks, especially like the Vader pilot, need a lot of actions to finish the job. The Luke deck's a little bit less so, just because they have the Cinta, and the Boba decks can flip topple. And so if you're expecting to be dead on the first action of 5R or on 6R on a lot of those games, kill them on 5R, or be able to be in a position where you can claim and then kill them the first action of 6R. As for the credit decks, I think Vel specifically is really well positioned against those credit decks, even though we saw Tata lose to Lando in the finals. With main deck cards like Arvel Skeen and Galen that we were talking about as these credit hate options, that also goes against Lando's plan. There is that tension of Vel giving them credits while Lando can also make credits on their own. Can you out-hate the credit generation? But they have the tools for the job.
Yeah. Kyle, do you think that the existence of Vel in the format right now kind of will lead to more main deck upgrade hate? Because if people are playing credits in general and Vel is equipped to destroy them, you know, we're seeing a lot of the Landos play it in the side, not necessarily in the main outside of Gorn.
Sorry, do you mean Galen's played in the side, not out in the main?
Well, just in general, like, do you think that we're going to get to the spot similar to certain points in the past where upgrade hate in the main deck was something that people were considering? Do you think that just far and wide, we're going to be at a spot soon where we're playing credit hate in the main?
Yeah, definitely in the 60, right? For certain, right? It's already one thing I've folded into all of my sideboards or my main decks in any way that I can, especially if Lando comes on the rise. I think this deck in particular was really smart by KTOD. I predicted last week, we talked about Jin, my girl Jin. I love Jin. I played a lot of Jin. I don't think she has it. I think this is the smarter version, right? A lot of times with Jin, her leader side ends up doing nothing because I don't want to play below curve. I want to draw a card, but I can't afford to play below curve to either keep up with my opponent or do what I need to do my turn. So she ends up really being just flip draw 1. I don't get to draw that much off of her. Whereas Vel can be more effective in kind of doing the same game plan, being more aggressive so that you can do exactly what Mickey just talked about with racing. We'll get into it in meta prediction, but I just think this was a very smart way to take this same blue-red pile and just do it better.
Yeah. Sharkey, any thoughts?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, going back to the Hounds part, and in terms of racing, that actually represents 6 damage from hand in a lot of
That's
ways,
true.
like against the space decks. Combine that with making Hona bigger, and one of the things that sticks out to me about Vel in particular, as opposed to like the previous, what I would call experience giver would be like Obi-Wan, is that you can stack experience onto something. Sometimes you can make it so that they have no way to deal with, like if their best removal is charged with treason and they can only do 5 damage, then suddenly 6 life is looking pretty good. That's one of the things I think that makes Vel dangerous. I am interested to see, with all of this and Lando becoming popular, how much can they stand the credit hate that will be coming their way? How much is this Quinlan of past where he was not great as top dog but was great as second? I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a really cool development, I think, from the Jin decks.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 6 pieces of upgrade of credit hate in the main here, 2 in the side, and I don't know how anyone could watch what we saw this weekend and not think Lando was going to be on the rise, right? So I don't know if it's going to lead to decks teching this much, right? But it's something that I think we need to keep our eyes on moving forward. And also, I think that I'm also fully convinced at this point that some of these traditional color pairings that we're used to seeing, like the Luke Data Vaults of the world, the aggressive decks being red, green, the green, blue villain having the most top end, where now it's yellow, blue or heroism. We're in a completely new paradigm, and it's really exciting to see. Another one of those examples here is Luke Yellow. This was played by one of the McClunky teams on day 1 on Saturday. Typically you see this in green, but just a little bit more of an aggressive pile here really going hard as opposed to trying to get some pings in and stuff, Kyle.
Yeah, I liked this one in particular and called it out, because it was interesting. Yellow is not typically what you see. We're seeing a lot of green, data vault, that sort of thing. But I think what's extra, what you're trying to do here is you're really leaning into space and really leaning into punishing other space decks, right? So you're not just the space deck, but you're also playing, fireballs, some of these cards to really make sure if they're also in space, you're winning that battle, right? And so this is, might have been a bit of a targeting deck because of the 3v3 format. This is the deck that you say, I'm going to kill their space deck with this, but it's also just a strong deck, and there's just a lot going for yellow right now. So it makes sense to give it a go.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I generally agree with you. I mean, it also combines the fact that, like, if they're not going to do the space plan and you're not targeting, like, against decks that are trying to race you on the ground, things that can be put, like Han Solo, onto a ship become massively dangerous on top of being able to play with the pings and the interaction from Beguile.
Yeah. For me, I think the big differentiation between yellow and green is I think green gives you the best interaction. You get the resistance squadron X-Wing, the 4-cost 3/4 that shoots something for how many spaceships you have. You get air superiority. You just get more ways to interact with the ground, whereas the yellow deck gives you a lot more explosivity. The black squadron B-Wing, I believe it is, the 5-drop 4/6, that whenever you play an upgrade, you can attack immediately and give it +1/+0. It turns your ferocities with plot into extra copies of Cinta, basically.
Yeah.
And so, like, I believe there was a game in the semifinals of the team's event. It was Nicky Morgan, B-Many, was playing this Lando yellow deck. He seemed dead to rights. His board was cleared. He stuck that B-Wing on 5. On 6, he flipped Luke, plotted 2 Sun Ferocities, punched his opponent, and then untapped 7R, punched his opponent again, and the game was over. So that kind of explosivity is really, I think, the biggest boon for this, the yellow build over the green build.
Yeah, 100%. And just another, attesting to this color is that we saw quite a bit of Chewie as well throughout the weekend. This is Dayhawk's list. He was on the Pasquale fan club, the team who won the McClunky team event on Saturday. Didn't do so hot on the Sunday event. I think just had some matchup luck to deal with. But one thing that we're seeing kind of pop up in all of these decks, I'm pretty sure it was in Luke. Let me double check. Yeah, and it wasn't in Luke, but it was in the Vel list that we were looking at, and we'll see it in some other lists across the weekend, is Commence the Festivities, right? Yeah. We're seeing that be kind of the anti-Sentinel hate. Couple interesting sequences today. Archie Chomp was playing this and against Aura, and I think it was in the top 8 round of the top cut, and missed a sequencing trigger to lose 2 damage, and it really came back to bite him a little bit there. But I think that just goes to show how powerful that event is, right, Mickey?
Yeah, and red as a whole has become the pump color instead of yellow. Previously, in pre-rotation, it was like Surprise Strike and Hot Shot Blaster, all from the yellow decks, and the yellow decks were the ones you'd have to worry about all this pump. And now red has gotten a lot of these new pump effects, like Commence the Festivities is a big one. They already had Aggressive Negotiations. They also got Flash the Events, which is like the new Heroic Sacrifice, effectively. And so it's kind of an identity shift of, and I personally like it because I see aggression as more the aggressive color.
Sure.
It's the color that's trying to finish the game quickly. And I also like how conditional these pumps are. Like, they have one effect, but if you add a little extra, like you work a little harder, like with this Chewie deck, you're defeating your own resources, or maybe you're playing a Dedra deck and you stop resourcing on 4 because you've already flipped your leader. And so just ways that you can play around. And as the opponent, maybe I deliberately stop on 5 because I've already flipped my leader because I'm a 5 to play, and sure, that extra resource would be nice, but I don't want to die to that 2 extra pump. It adds a lot of back and forth gameplay, which I really like from such a simple design.
Yeah, Sharky, I see you nodding your head along.
I love that kind of dance with the gameplay, and it gives you more reasons to not just keep resourcing and to consider why and what you're resourcing. I was going to mention the card as well. I've actually been running it with Darth Vader lately, and it's been an all-star. Sorry, I'm diabetic. One of the other cards that I see here as well, though, is at least the Cantina crew favors. He's run a couple moral authorities here, and I can only imagine Chewie is just a monster when he puts those around.
Well, it's funny you mention that, is because in that top 8 match, there was a Cantwell cruiser set up exhausting the Chewie leader with the Sheathpede up in space. So the Cantwell swung into the Sheathpede, got 2 damage on it, and then the Moral Authority was online, and that was just enough to get another action in to push towards base, and really, really good stuff here. So one thing I was thinking as I was commentating, obviously breaking the fourth wall a little bit, we have access to the deck list by being staff in Melee, but we don't want to reveal what they are. But just to inform my commentary, I take a look to see if there could possibly be any answers, right? And one thing I thought of was like, damn, this guy's gonna have a hard time dealing with 7 HP in space right now, right? And Moral Authority came in clutch. But to your point about the sequencing, Sharky, even with cards like Kazuda and Broken Horn and using Chewie's ability, you have to be really cognizant of how you're sequencing that, right? If you need to have less resources, you need to activate Chewie's on play before you attack, right? Like you need to get these things going in a way that makes sense for your turn. And I think as just like this quote unquote aggro deck right now, Chewie's really interesting. And it's not a pilot aggro, which kind of sets himself off by himself a little bit anyway. But it's just it's a little less linear than you would expect, I think.
A lot of interesting decisions to be made basically each time you do anything. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, any thoughts before we get on to our next list?
Yeah, just the one thing I noticed about Chewie, at least in our early testing, some of the playing we've had is, at least within the team, we've talked about him being kind of an all-in strategy, just kind of really going for it on the first couple of turns and trying to kill your opponent. One thing I noticed this weekend was some of the Chewie games going a little bit longer and still being able to close out, right? Being able to extend the game with, getting to the Broken Horn, playing multiple cards on later turns, even some delayed flips, that sort of thing. So definitely the strategy here is evolving, and it can go a little longer than I'd originally thought.
100%. One thing that is really cool to see is and we found this, Sharky, when we were building that Poe Yellow deck, with They Hate That Shit being really effective on turn one. And as opposed to trying to get the biggest thing out, you get something that kind of fixes your curve after you play below curve with Chewie's ability, which is just a really interesting concept. And overall, I think Kazuda was a big all-star for this deck, especially as you get late. And from watching it, it's like they weren't grinding, but they're just like easy for me to say, opportunistically setting up a hit from one side or the other, whether it's with Commence the Festivities or just providing multiple threats that can't be handled all at once, plus a buff. Really, really good stuff from Dayhawk over the whole weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Next list that we'll pull up here from this team event is Ularen Red. And Kyle, I know you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, so I'm excited enough about this one that I'm gonna admit that about 10 minutes before we went on air, I found a cheap Ularen showcase and I bought it, so it'll be here.
Nice.
So this deck, out of all the decks we were looking for surprising decks, I would say most of the leaders and leader pairings were like, okay, I expected that in some way or another. I don't know if I've been living in a rabbit hole, but this deck had not even occurred to me, right? And so when I saw this list, I thought, whoa, weird, what is this? And so I built it and I started playing it. This deck will kill you very, very fast. This deck felt like the juiced up version of the Ularens you'd run into in Sealed last set, right? Like there's sometimes Ularen would just kind of get a ground unit and get a space unit like that 5/3 and just kind of kill you fast. But this is the same deck. It's just that it works in constructed because now you've got all the good stuff, right? And so we got a lot more droids this set that kind of all pair together. The new L3 actually kind of works here. The droid ship works. So there's ways to continue to pull things out, evolve your board and keep going. And it just hits really hard. If you haven't seen this deck, I would encourage you guys just to give it a couple games because it's fun to kill people in like 3 turns, right?
This looks awesome.
Yeah. Also fun to get killed in 3 turns. So I actually built this deck a few weeks ago. And we did some testing with it. Sharky, I think that was the day that we were really working on Poe at first too. We were kind of messing a little bit with Unity of Purpose coming in with the splash just to have a little bit of extra fun. But
now.
When you hit these lines, when you get the L3 going, it's pretty crazy. But without, I'm a little skeptical. Really excited to get proven wrong though. So we'll see. Mickey, what are your thoughts?
One of the things I like about this one though, real quick, is the splash into the interrogation droid is probably my favorite splash I've seen. That card is insane. I love interrogation droid.
Yeah, interrogation droid is so hot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, that's a cool. And then I noticed the BD1 in the side. What?
Yeah.
That's kind of awesome.
Well, you could play these droids from L3 or the Invisible Hand without aspect penalties, right? So
yeah,
interesting.
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. And those are 2 things I wanted to call out real quick. Like those are awesome.
Yeah, Mickey.
2 things I really want to point out with this list. This is kind of my first time seeing the full list, and like absorbing it. I really like the L3s and the invisible hands in the late game as well, like after your leader has been defeated, because you stick an invisible hand, you cheat out the Imperial Dark Trooper, the 3/3, and that represents 9 damage in one action because your Ularen, it developed 2 bodies. So your Ularen ability can attack with the invisible hand and then with the 3/3 immediately. L3 similarly, it's not as like aggressively statted since the L3 body is so small, but it still presents a lot of damage in one action while developing multiple threats. I really like that in combination with the Ularen ability. The other thing I want to point out here is 3 of Zeton Maj. Burn is really hard to come by in this format. There's like the Intro to Battle Hoth card that's like 2 damage, deal 2 to a base, or the collateral damage that deals 2 damage to one thing and then 2 damage to another thing in the same arena or to the base. And Zeton Maj can deal 2 damage 1, 2, even 3 times, and it's just like a well-statted body. 4 or 5, that's gonna punch you hard. If it gets like 6 damage because it claimed and then got an attack in, maybe that's just enough.
Also really just synergizes well with Ularen's ability early. So you have a couple different avenues here, right? Like you could lean into that droid creation line. You could just lean into hyper activating Ularen, claiming quickly. I also just think, you know, you're more than likely on 6 to have more actions, even if your opponent sells out to stop the Ularen flip on 5. Like if you just play the invisible hand, get another ship out, like you'll be able to claim in pretty quickly into 7. So pretty interesting line there. Aggressive deck for sure. Wonder if we'll ever see it pop up or if this is the right shell for L3, but it's really interesting to see that kind of ability. We were really low on it in our legendary rankings. I'm still really undecided about it. I'd like to see it in action and see if we get L3 in a list that could support
We
it
might
well.
still end up being low even after this one. It just might have it found a deck, you know?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Well, I'm excited to play this in our internal tournaments. The other thing I would mention is right now, if I'm doing aggro, I think I want to be aggro on the ground. It was kind of the reverse in previous sets because there was a lot of ground sentinels, but now there's so much space stuff and Luke stuff and things that just kill your ships that being the aggro on the ground almost feels a safer way to go. And, you know, when you're getting multiple units out, some people don't do the math for aggressive negotiation, realize that with Ularen, I can hit with 2 things plus AG. Suddenly I just did 15, right? And it's pretty nuts.
Yeah. So just looking at Lando real quick, this was the one of the winning deck lists from the McClunky team. And like you mentioned, this whole sideboard, the full 10 cards is set up for space, right? You have Tantive, you have Hyperspace Disaster, Trio Members, and Galen. Galen's obviously multi-purpose in a lot of ways. And it is something to think about in terms of what you're teching for and how that works. Today, we'll talk about the solo event a little bit later on, but we saw Lando go into a Vader in the top 4 there, and it was tough, right? Especially post board. There you had answers all the way up and down the curve. Fireball, Blue Ace, Liberty, right? Like these are really strong options that you have to deal with. And going back to Chewie real quick, I think that's part of why Chewie kind of stood out because of its balanced nature, being able to attack both arenas and provide threats all up and down the board, basically. Mickey, you're knocking your head along.
Yeah, I think lane dodging is a big part of the game, and like where a lot of intricate decks can find their purchase and like find a lot of fine edges. Quinlan was a little bit like this sometimes. You just dominated the ground, but a lot of games you just poked them to death in the late game with Falcon. And so Chewie, I think, has a big space package, especially with They Hate That Ship. You want to put 12, 15 3-drop ships in your deck for that flip turn, play a 3-drop ship. But inherently you're going to be beating down on the ground as well because you have such a big leader so early on the ground, and making your opponent worry about both lanes is huge. Like, do they over index onto the ground trying to answer you Chewbacca and you just like stick 2 space units and finish them? Or do they like worry so much about ambushing all your space units while your Chewie's chipping away for 5 a turn that, you know, making your opponent respect both lanes when a lot of people are over indexing for one or another, like Luke is super anti-space as a space deck, and Talzin is super anti-ground as a ground deck. But being able to split the difference there is really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, as a space deck, I think you need to have an answer to Hyperspace Disaster. Whether it is something where you're blanking it like Galen, you're pulling it out of their hand like Jam Communications, or Hold for Questioning, or Garindin, or whatever it is. I don't think you're going to be able to win with the amount of top end that's available to some of these decks if you get hit by that hyperspace size impediment, right, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just yellow in general, going back to kind of just where yellow is so effective right now, it just feels like we've had sets where we've gone through in the past where it's like you want to be in red, or you want to be in, whatever, green. We had a long stretch of green. Right now, I feel like in some ways it's yellow, and yellow heroism specifically, because it just gives you so many tools to be that balanced attack or have a balanced answer, like we were talking about. I mean, just look here as you're looking through this deck. So many of these cards have flexibility from just a stats perspective, but also an answer perspective. We talked Blue Ace. We already talked about Gorn earlier, right? Just being a stat pile. That's a balanced, effective card. All the way up to Liberty and, of course, Bo. It's just there's so many good cards right now that are condensed to make Lando effective. It's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
On top, like, even to continue with that though, like playing Mandalorian or Qui-Gon can also answer multiple arenas.
That's my biggest
That's
point
insane.
here, is that we're talking about their medium top end being Mando and Qui-Gon. That's ridiculous. Like, that's not
right.
normal, like even going back to the Yoda top end last set, like Bo, Luke, Yoda himself, like that was bigger and might be bigger than this, but the pace in which you could get there this way is crazy. And it has a different feel of consistency over You're My Only Hope in a lot of ways, right? So obviously you were able to cheat resources and you were ramping as well back with that Yoda build, but man, being able to play Liberty or Mandalorian or even Qui-Gon on your flip turn is really crazy. And I wonder if this is a deck, like we mentioned with the Quinlan comparison, if it could withstand some of the credit hate, if it can withstand this sort of thing. Really going to be paying attention to Adepticon this weekend to see what that's like, even though it's a little bit of a smaller event as well. But I'm going to PQ the following weekend. I got to lock in. I got to know what I'm going to be playing, right? And to your point about yellow, Sharkey, or Kyle, I've been working on Boba Yellow and stuff like that, and even Boba Blue pilot, and I've been thinking to myself, man, like, I need a backup to Hyperspace Disaster here. I can't just count on Cinta being a ground threat. Like, are we bringing back the Jug? Are we playing some sort of 5-cost vehicle on the ground or something? Like, I joke about it, but I'm thinking about it, So it's an interesting spot to be meta-wise. And like we mentioned as we were getting started here tonight, the team tournament in a lot of ways is different, right? And it's going to be, we'll talk about the solo stuff here in a second, but the team tournament's different. But I think a couple of takeaways, and we'll go around, do a little round robin, what it is. For me, for the biggest takeaway from the team is that I don't think space is as important as I did a week ago, or maybe even 2 weeks ago. I think that there was a space deck involved in basically every team pairing to target specific things, but overlapping everywhere. I don't think we're going to see as many pilots as I once assumed. Kyle, let's go to you next.
Yeah, interesting. I'll jump on that as well too. Like, one of the decks that it's funny because it feels like the last set where we early on, Boba Pilot was a deck that a lot of people were high on. You thought, man, Topple is just so good, and there's all these reasons why Boba Pilot might be good. And in early testing, it kind of dominates until things get figured out, and then it starts to dissipate, right? So that's an example of what you were just talking about there. Just a pilot deck that just felt so good early on, but then you start to see some of these answers. You start to see some of the ways that the other deck can interact with you, and just kind of, I don't know, waters down what you're trying to do. But I think we'll get more interesting insight in the individual events to where the meta's headed.
Yeah, Sharky?
I think the data is pointing to a balanced attack being at least strong, and I would say probably the best way to attack the meta right now. I don't think necessarily going all in on either side is the right one. Part of the reason the space decks became known as being powerful is because they could just outrun the guys who were only concentrating on the ground. And so suddenly when all the answers to the space decks are also coming in, but you have threats that can do either dual arena or find a way to make it so you can pick the other one that you're not in and must mess up your whole game plan. I think having the balanced attack is actually right now, at least until the credit problem gets solved, probably the way to go.
Yeah, I think for me, my takeaway is like a bit of a next step from these takeaways where it's like, I think people have adapted to the initial play patterns, right? A lot of very early meta was ship into Chewbacca, guy into lightsaber, just super upgrading. And now all the good players and like most of the players in general are now respecting that and playing around it. So they aren't going guy into Chewbacca. They're kind of dancing around their opponent, making them play around it. And people are going to instill these habits of, all right, I don't have to worry about a Chewbacca on turn 2 because my opponent's going to respect it. So when do we go back to step 1 of just, I'm going to slam my Chewbacca and make you have it?
Yeah.
Like, when does that start to become the strategy of, all right, I'm going to make them have it. I'm going to make them have answers all the way up the curve.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for me, just closing things out there, I think that's the natural ebb and flow of trying to figure this stuff out. Sharky, you've been playing more upgrades that are known to man, right? The pilot decks we've all been testing
100%.
from different perspectives. And, for me, I think one of the main things that I was shocked about, it was just how bad the Obi-Wan conversion rate was. It was the second most represented deck with 7 in the field in this team event, right?
Mhm.
And 0 converted. Same thing on Sunday. I knew it was a deck that had bad matchups, but I think when you're getting this many bad matchups, it builds. And then Lando coming in really isn't good for Obi, I don't think, as well, because
It's interesting. Yeah.
Lando is just big, right? Obi could get there too, but in a lot of a slower pace. And I think we're in a little bit of a credit next couple weeks, and that's really good because I think PremierGames.store is going to have a restock of their credits coming up here within the month of March. We told you about them all throughout the preseason. If you didn't get them, they sold out. You could go there and use code Colorado Cantina Crew, save 10% on your order. We got the Old Republic tokens, we got the Imperial tokens, and the heady Cantina Crew tokens. Maybe we'll do another one of those giveaways coming up. So go over to PremierGames.store and get them. There were people on stream today using cards and dice. Get into the bling bling era, right? I mean, I just get
Make
so
it
much
shiny.
joy and happiness out of these. So go over to PremierGames.store and maybe you'll get some joy and happiness too. We'll see. Okay, so going over towards the solo event, another win from Tyler. So Tyler, MVP of the weekend. Outside of Tim and Claire from McClunky doing the streams, Tyler completely dominated this weekend. Mickey, he's your co-host or cast, whatever it is, on Underwhelming Barrage each week. So let's start with you. What were your general thoughts on his performance and Lando in general?
Yeah, he crushed it going into the weekend, and you could tell that like he had just built, I think, the best deck into a wide room. He had all the answers for the space with like the blue aces, and we talked a bit about this with just the Lando blue build in general. But with the blue ace and the grassroots resistance and stuff, just ways to interact with space and heal up, and just dominating the ground with all those big ambushers. And you can tell he kind of knew his lines based on the given matchup. And it seemed like a switch almost of like, all right, space this game plan, ground this game plan. And those game plans worked. And I was especially impressed, again, to go back to him versus John Tata, another Underwhelming Barrage member, in the finals, because Vel is a deck that should be well equipped to defeat these credits. But he showed that like, Lando has these cheating aspects, but he can also just play a fair game up the curve. And you had mentioned it, Jordan, funnily enough, about how it felt almost Yoda-esque sometimes. Spoiler alert, I've been working on the new shiny yellow hero leader, and in a lot of my deck names are just Han plus Yoda equals Lando. And it really feels like that combination of like Spark of Rebellion Han plus the Yoda. You mash them together, you get that style leader. But it's that gives me some faith and potential resiliency against credit hate, because he fought some credit hate, and you can just play up the curve, and all you need to do is sneak that one and get that explosive play, and you're good to go.
Yeah, Sharky, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's really cool to see Lando doing well. We all kind of thought he'd be at least good in the preseason stuff, and it's interesting to see that borne out. Now, I'll admit to having not figured out what seems to be the color right now. The popular one is blue, whether it's Colossus or whether it's Splash or anything, but blue seems to give a lot of the top end some real punch to it. I've seen a few interesting ones in green as well. So like Lando as a leader is very interesting, and I want to see what the response will be and whether he can weather it. But like, this is awesome. It's really cool to see something like that.
Well, you're showing the list. The list is basically yellow, right? So what am I getting from blue? I'm getting Bo-Katan,
Ezra,
and then I guess my sideboard.
Yeah,
right?
the sideboard, like the Galen.
Yeah, Ezra's replaceable, right? Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways to build Lando and a lot of room for experimentation here. I'm not even convinced still that blue is the best one. It's just the first one we're seeing do well. It's just that when you look at this list, you can take the core of the yellow here and then just go, hey, there are a few green cards I really want. There are a few red cards I really want. I think that there's still a ways to go on the discovery here, and it could end up being another aspect. And so we'll see. Lando appearing to be flexible just because he's hero yellow, and hero yellow really got a lot.
Yeah.
I do want to quickly point out as well, Lando has so many different ways to build it in every color. What base you choose, what aspect you're going to call, because if you notice on these two lists, Tyler prioritized heroism, here we go, as his call, and the Colossus list prioritized cunning. And then we saw in the Nexus Invitational the past week, there was a Lando deck that prioritized calling Vigilance. So like that's 3 totally different ways to build a Lando deck. And like I think most of the decks have realized, you know, it's worth it to play a couple out of aspect options from your call. Here it's the Bo-Katan. If it's a non-heroism build, maybe you want to play some piece of interaction, whether that's Beguile or Axe Forgets or something. And if it's in blue, obviously you want to be playing Liberty. Maybe you want to be playing the Mando as well. But just like figuring out not only what color's correct, but what is your primary color within that color? And then what am I playing out of aspect? There's like so many intricacies there.
And like, let's just look at it, right? So we have 35 Colossus, we have 30 blue. Last week it was the splash base in London. This weekend we saw Lando green, right? I haven't seen any red ones pop up. Let us know in the comments if you have a nice list for us to check out. But like, I think that the Spectres are really great cards. I think they're really powerful. I'm kind of getting to the opinion that almost nothing matters in this deck besides getting to your flip turn with a credit without a ton of damage on base and getting your top end out, right? Especially watching the mirror. And you guys all know that I really like mirrors. I get a lot of joy out of watching them and breaking them down. And it really just felt like who got their top end with the best timing and was able to sequence that top end appropriately, who was able to make the better gamble of saying, hey, I'm going to wait a turn to play Mando first and then Bo-Katan later and stuff along those lines. But even just looking at this Colossus deck, there are some really cool includes. Like they're doing the Master Code Breaker combo with Faith in Your Friends and the Axe Remembers. I was honestly kind of surprised how easily and consistently Patrick Flynn was able to trigger that Faith in Your Friends with Colossus having one less hand size.
So yeah, that's interesting too. One of the questions I had in the Lando mirror is, do you start discarding from your deck, or do you figure out what they're made?
They were doing
that's
it.
what I mean.
Awesome.
You start discarding the other guy, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to call out. Was I think once you figure out what your opponent's key color is, you definitely go after their deck, right? Because I think Tyler in the finals even milled a couple of important cards. We were talking about the high end. There was at least one time he ripped a Mando off the top, right? So not only is he getting the credits, but he's also taking away his opponent's threats. So, I think he keyed in on that pretty early while his opponent kept spending all of his resources, and probably by necessity because he was in the Liberty turns. But it was interesting.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, the Lando mirrors seem like they could be either incredibly fun and intense or incredibly miserable, depending on did my liberties get milled? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it opens up this cool deck building space too of like, all right, if my opponent's milling me, what kind of recursion can I play? Like, do I play green and then I can play salvage and get that liberty milled back? Stuff like that. As well as alongside with the Codebreaker and the Faith in Your Friends thing, having played some Lando, oftentimes Faith in the late game, I don't care if I get the spies. I just want to find the next Bo-Katan. I just want to find the next Liberty. I just need to spin my wheels, find my next big bomb, because if I can keep slamming those bombs, that's all that matters. So just that card filtering, and a card that I think is missing from this list that I would try out if I was Patrick here, and wasn't played in Tyler's list probably because of the aspect, is the new Qui-Gon Sentinel. It's not card draw, but it's card filtering. You get one deeper, you get to set up the top of your deck, then you can potentially mill a card, and you know what you're going to call with your aspect. So then you get 2 cards deeper, and then you can start digging for those bombs that way too. Plus, it's just a 3/5 Sentinel. It's not bad stats.
Yeah,
or you get 4D chess, and then you put down the wrong aspect on top of your deck. So when they mill you, they don't get
exactly.
And a card that was really good, I think, in the early portions of the mirror was Finn for Patrick here. I don't know if it's good enough for an include in the heroism perspective of it, but really strong either way, and just kind of that like gateway towards top end. Probably a little bit better than Depa, but Depa is definitely serviceable.
It's a close enough parallel that I think you don't want to make that sacrifice if you have something that's close, but it is very like a potential reason to be playing the yellow version instead of the heroism version.
Yeah, and Tyler spoke very highly again of Loth Wolf because how dangerous aggressive negotiations is, and just being able to kind of lock down both arenas with either a Lando, a Wolf, or a Liberty or Tantive, depending on the situation.
Well, the Loth Wolf saved him against Tata, right? He slammed a Wolf because Tata had Vel flipped, and aggressive negotiations was, I think, potentially lethal at the time, but he had 2 credits left, slammed on a Loth Wolf, and just shut that lane down, right?
Yep.
Yeah. A sneaky card that you had just mentioned, Jordan, that we haven't talked much about is the new Lando Sentinel. That card has been a real haymaker. It's a mini turret, and its effect isn't quite as potent, but it's always online, and you
It's
never have to
just
worry
as
about getting
annoying.
the Force.
Yeah.
It is just as annoying. So that card's been impressive.
Absolutely. We don't have a TCG player affiliation or anything like that, but it is wild to me how cheap this Lando card is right now.
Yeah.
When Typho in the exact situation a couple sets ago, or one set ago, excuse me, was like $15-20 at this point in the season. Lando's awesome, right? Like everybody that's playing blue heroic is going to be playing Lando. So if you haven't gotten, I would jump on it. They're like $2-3. Like it's absolutely
I
crazy.
luckily pulled 3 hyperspace from my regular boxes, so I'm good.
Jordan's just trying to sell.
I got my
Landos
Landos.
after the price goes
Oh
up.
yeah,
and
you're trying to
everybody
get
jumps on
my
it.
trying to do some market manipulation to my TCG. You got me. All right, so enough Lando talk. Really cool thing. Let's move on to a deck
I do love it.
that I think we all thought was really cool. Sharky, we'll let you go first because you're
Ooh.
the guy that likes the most jank here.
Oh yeah, I love this one.
The Thrawn Red by Rye Weezy. If you guys have a couple minutes and you can only watch a couple clips from this weekend, I would go back and find this Thrawn versus Aura Sig match and watch just the last 5 minutes of game 3. Just amazing stuff here. So aggressive. Such great gameplay back and forth, and you got to give Raiweezy some credit here. Like, this isn't a deck that's on anyone's radar. In all 3 games versus Aura Singh, he didn't splash one time. Obviously, just the legacy run's not the best, not the best include there for that, but really cool list, right, Sharky?
Yeah. So to start, it's the Bardot and Ornithopter.
Whatever, bro. It's a tough card. I had a struggle with it on stream.
One of the things I really like about this particular deck is actually Flash the Vents now being the heroic sacrifice is now in aspect, so you don't have to worry about trying to get weird and out of aspect with it, which changes your deck building. But what seems like dual modes when I was watching this deck, you have the kind of sort of control the board, kind of like build up phase, and then you have the absolute smackdown phase, which like you can either draw a million cards in aggressive negotiations, you can flip into 2 sudden ferocities and lay the beat down, you can kind of just play both the cards that show up and like the anti whatever you're against strategy. It's not so much of which game plan am I trying to implement as where is the weakness in my opponent, and this has enough tools that kind of like can go either direction on that, and that's really cool. And given that we actually have a smaller card pool now with less when defeated effects, to see this thing show up like that is really cool to me. And it's something I'm excited to try out.
Yeah, Kai, I know you tried it a couple times this morning.
Yeah, so I thought it was extra cool because of the really fun matchup we got on stream playing against a hard control Aura Singh. Aura wants to kill everything, and Thrawn's sitting there going, "Please do, thank you." Yeah, right. So it seemed like a particularly bad matchup for Aura, which made this, I guess, look maybe stronger than it was. But I wanted to know, so I immediately built it and started playing it. And I did kind of run into that a little bit, right? As I ran into some of the other meta go fast type decks, I had a very hard time keeping up with this deck. So I'm going to put it more in the fun category than the potentially meta good category. But I did really enjoy seeing it. And, we are talking about decks that were interesting that popped up. And this was a lot of fun. Go watch that matchup.
Yeah.
I think what this deck also highlights is the core of blue-red cards in this set and in this format is just so powerful. We saw Jin, we've seen Vel, and now we see it in Villainy with Thrawn, that Xiao Fane, Hona, you got Sudden Ferocity, you have the new Village Protectors, the 2/1 Sentinel. Not all these cards are necessarily played in every single deck, but like that core of Xiao, Aggressive, and Hona can really prop up some cool archetypes. And I'm curious to see, because like we went from Jin to Val, and now it's like, what's the next step? Is there another heroic leader, or is there a villainy leader like this Thrawn, or like is Asajj Pilot ever something you want to explore in this kind of archetype? Get those juices flowing with this card pool and see where you can go with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, there really isn't that much villainy. It's a lot of just blue-red generic and stuff you could sub in and out around the edges. That's, I think, one of the interesting things about these early tournaments is that we look at the set, we look at all the stuff preseason, we work on it, and then we get an idea in one place that might translate somewhere interesting on the other side. I think the same thing can be said with Chewie from a lot of perspectives, or that Luke Yellow deck, right? Like, the same concept of just being able to hit, like, where does it go next? Is it wedge? Who knows? I guess we'll have to stay tuned to find out and stuff like that. Really fun list. I'm not sure how competitive it is, but very fun. And I think one thing I would add here is a second splash, either in the side or in the main, because although Legacy Run really is amazing, there are going to be a couple matchups, and you know what? Realistically speaking, you weren't expecting a heavy control meta share this weekend, so I could understand not adding it for that purpose. But I think moving forward, you might want to find something else besides the legacy.
I do have a
Splash.
suggestion for that, actually.
Hit me.
The Stranger.
Okay.
Ooh.
I think that's a great splash target here. I mean, it doesn't have a win defeated, but being able to ambush and kill a bunch of stuff and then leave a big target behind is kind of what Thrawn likes to do anyway. So it might be worth testing that out.
Yeah. Noticeably lacking 5 drops here. I mean, you have the legacy run, and then I believe this HK that I've never played in my life outside of pre-release or something is also a 5 drop, but I'm not sure. Okay. A couple more lists to get through before we start chatting about some predictions, but just wanted to showcase this Talzin list from Josh Everly. He had a good weekend as well. But for me, the only thing I really want to mention is this KT podcast. Or this is a podcast, KT Pod Racer. Pod Racers were around before podcasts, and this is podcasting. That's a good one. That should be our new slogan. But basically, you get to create a credit when played, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of skip that quote unquote 4 resource turn to get to 5, whether it's for Stranger, Xian, or anything along those lines. I really like it. Maybe it's 3 to 4, not 4 to 5. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked it because I think one of the big things in Talzin Yellow especially is there's a real lack of 3 drops. And there's a couple kind of ways you can work around it. You either have to play some kind of forced off aspect ones, like you could play Cicatro is another one I've seen, or you can play the Krennic package and try to 2+1. But the KT9 being able to line up those credits up the curve, and like it lets you Stranger on 4R, it lets you Flurry Vader on 6, it lets you Cantwell early, like it just every step of the curve, it opens up extra play lines, which I really like. And the other quick thing I want to point out about this deck is 2 quick things. One is the Cantwell as the top end. That's kind of unique. I think most people are trying out stuff like the Sun or Darth Nihilus, especially with the Flurry. But Cantwell really impressed on stream, as well as Xian Flurry plus Darth Vader. That's kind of a pivot point of the deck of, do you want to play Xian Flurry or do you not? Do you want to play Darth Vader or do you not? And so seeing those choices here was another really interesting data point.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the pod race. So it's a cool include, and it enabled a lot of things like Mickey was just talking about. What stuck to me was that Flurry Vader on 6 is now relevant, is probably the right way to put it. And so it's interesting to me that a lot of the yellow Talzins I had seen had moved away from the Sheen Flurry Vader package. But it's cool to see it come back, and I think the best way to enable, or maybe not the best way, but like a great way to enable it is to play this pod racer. So that's really interesting to me. Another card to like to call out is the Commandeer in the side. Obviously a lot of the Force decks to this point have had trouble with space, and that is one of my favorite cards. So it's kind of fun to see that answer start popping back up again.
Totally. And you know, internally, a lot of us have been playing Talzin, myself included, Kyle as well. Mickey, I know that you're spending a lot of time working on it too. And internally, there's been some, not disagreement, but just differences of opinion in terms of, are we playing the ambush package? Like, do we want Sheen Flurry? Do we want to play Nihilus and Thrawn? I think some people are on the Sun. I've been more in the Nihilus and Thrawn area, playing like 1 or 2 Cantwells. Seeing 3 here kind of shows what that space domination can do, is in addition to that exhaust. Also seeing something that stood out to me these past couple weeks with yellow, especially with Villainy, is Hold for Questioning is just such a good card. That package around cunning Villainy and cunning aggression with exhaust, tap, bounce, discard, it all is kind of coming together. And I know Mickey, you and I were talking about it a couple of days, just trying to find the right shell for it.
Yeah, not necessarily Talzin related, but when you go Cyril Karn into Interrogation Probe Droid, it feels like you're cheating. Like your opponent either has to discard 2 cards or let you kill their ground unit, and like there's a lot of powerful interactions there. And it's kind of like that blue-red core we were talking about with Hona and Xiao Fein, but the blue-red core has a lot more natural homes, whereas right now that red-yellow villain package is still kind of searching for a home. Maybe it's just a Bubba yellow deck and you play a little bit more ground focused, but maybe it's one of these other leaders, you know. It's an interesting space to explore.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I'll say here is the contracted Jump Master seems to be the sentinel of choice ahead of the Supremacy tie. Kyle, are you on board with that?
I haven't found that I really want to play Space Sentinel kind of at all in Talzin. I want to play more removal packages, commandeer, that sort of thing, than trying to just throw a unit up there and have it just die. Because a lot of these space decks have very efficient answers to me throwing up a tiny Space Sentinel. So I'd probably be looking elsewhere. I will say one card that I have been playing a little bit more, even in my Talzin, is Arrest. It can answer a Chewie if somebody wants to do that. Do you have it? Question. Well, yeah, I do. I'll just arrest him, right? But it's also a good way to just remove something off the board, for a turn while I'm trying to either set up or race you. So I'd probably be away from a small Sentinel option personally.
I do want to quickly point out as well, you had mentioned Arrest. I think one of the biggest deck building, not constraints, but like challenges with Talzin is it feels like it's the only deck in the format that is flush with removal. Every other deck is kind of scrapping for pieces of interaction, where you see in Josh's list here, he has Hold for Questioning, Whirlwind of Power, Condemn, Retaliation, No Glory, Shatterpoint, all these ambushers, Commandeers in the sideboard, Tree Remembers, Hyperspace Disaster, like just infinite removal compared to the rest of the format. But you can't play all of it. You got to be threatening your opponent. So what is the correct package for any given meta? That's a really tricky decision point.
Yeah, especially when you're running Sheen Flurry too, right? 3 more events that eat into the amount of units you could play. Sorry about that, Kyle.
Oh, I was just going to say part of the reasoning behind going with Arrest is that it costs 2. I want to be able to go 2+2 or 2+3 so that I can continue to build my threats while doing an answer. I don't want to be spending my whole turn just doing one piece of removal unless it's against something I really need gone, right?
Yeah. I think for
Chewie
me,
qualifies.
I hear you on Sakatro, Mickey. We saw that from one of the Enigma lists in London last weekend. I think I'm more a fan of this pod racer, to be honest. What do you guys think, real quick? Kyle, let's go you first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're not playing here is Treya, right? That's where people started. I would say Treya's ability to kind of ready Talzin and use it a second time, it tends to be just too slow. Maybe I want initiative anyway. So I agree that maybe getting off of Treya because her ability's not great, but I don't like not having a force unit because there are times in this deck where I'm off the force and it feels real bad because I got a lot of cards in my hand that need the force. So it's a trade-off. I definitely want to try it. I like the idea of, I don't think I want to be skipping 4. All my 4s are really good, but being able to get that if I'm doing She Invader or get to that Cantwell sooner does sound pretty appealing.
Yeah, I feel that too. Mickey, what are your thoughts on Nexicatro, Treya versus Pod Racer?
I really like the idea of Pod Racer. Unfortunately, I think we're entering a poor meta for it because we just saw Lando dominate. And I don't want to be getting caught by splash damage on the credit hate that might be in the main deck now. Now, if it's like something like a Galen and they name your credit, which means they didn't name your Talzin's Assassin or whatever in your hand, maybe that's worth it. But that would scare me off of the Pod Racer going forward. But I think it's a really cool idea to keep in your back pocket. As opposed to the other 3-drop, none of them have impressed me. That's like been a big hunt for me of what 3-drop. I honestly would default to the Krennic package and just trying to do 2+1, or like if you don't spend all your 3 resources on turn 2, it feels bad, but that's fine because your 4-drops are so good and like you'll just catch back up with your 4-drops.
Yeah, I think all of them are fair perspectives. For me, Sakatro is kind of just like a quasi Sentinel that's probably going to get taken out. They're not going to allow you to draw from that, or most players won't. And at least with the Pod Racer, you're getting something immediately. But to your point, you're going to be catching some strays pretty soon, and hopefully we can avoid that a little bit. Okay, one last note on Talzin here is that I don't have the list, but Red Dragon from McClunky, he was running more of an old DACA package, and I haven't spoken to Brandon about it, but I really think that that's in expectation of facing a lot of space. I could see that cycling of Talzin's Assassin being relatively valuable there on a given turn, especially if you could sequence it properly. And versus space decks, you should be able to sequence it in a way to get the force to be able to enable all that stuff. So just one final note there. So we went over the deck list, a lot of really good stuff. And like we mentioned, we have Adepticon next weekend, and then the first weekend of PQs. I'll be going to one in Vegas, so got to get ready for that. Let's talk about what we would sleeve up going to an event next weekend. And since I have one coming up, I think I might have the closest one. I'm not sure about you, Mickey. But for me, going into this weekend, I was really focusing in on finding out what my other options are. I've been playing a lot of OB up to this point. I played in a lot of our team events at our locals. It's been going pretty well, but there are the matchups there that scare me, and some of the data from these past couple weeks scares me as well. So I've really been thinking about Talzin and Boba Yellow and a little bit of Boba Blue, but after this weekend, I would be remiss to not give Lando a try, because it did really surprise me how little Boba we saw, both in the higher tables of the team event yesterday on Saturday, and we didn't see any Boba in the field whatsoever today. And it's a small field, so not reading into it too much. But I think if I was going to an event this next weekend, it probably wouldn't be Obi based on this data. It would probably be Talzin or potentially Boba Yellow for me. And I don't feel necessarily that massively confident about it. For me, going to an event in 2 weeks, if I practice Lando enough, I will feel comfortable. But going to this next weekend, I don't know if Lando's the type of deck that you pick up in 3 days and feel great about it. Mickey, you're nodding along with me. So what do you think?
Yeah, that kind of is exactly my choices. I don't know what color. I don't know in the case of Lando, I don't know the specific base, but my top two choices are Lando and Talzin. I think those are kind of the decks of the format. And if I had to choose one, I think I would pick Lando and be comfortable in the mirror, because I think Talzin kind of suffers into the Lando matchup as well. And so that is where my pick would be right now. I am definitely going to be keeping a close eye on the Adepticon meta to see if how quickly people respond to Lando. Because if people respond quickly enough, I might feel comfortable pivoting back to that Talzin, or maybe a different color. Maybe it's Talzin red can go fast enough to beat up these Landos. But those are kind of my top two decks. I think they're baseline power level, the two most powerful leaders in the format, just from a stats and efficiency perspective, as well as from Talzin and an explosiveness from Lando. So those are the decks I'd be looking at.
Sharkey, I know you were testing basically all weekend long, trying a lot of new things. What would you sleeve up if you were competing next weekend?
Do you want the Sharkey pick or the meta pick?
Let's do it first. We'll go the pick that you would give the viewers, the people that are putting their faith in you to get to do really well, and then we'll do a one that I would really enjoy doing. So please, the floor is yours. I'll even put you on full screen. Hold on, we'll get it going.
Oh boy. Yeah. No, to be honest, the thing that I have particularly found really good into Talzin and Lando actually is a red yellow villain package. My favorite is currently Vader, and the reason for that is all of the exhaust plus discard. So in the case of Lando, if you hold for questioning until Lando flips and you pull that bomb that he was about to play, doesn't matter what bomb it is, you're gonna just get it. And then Vader flips and does it himself. That's my favorite way to do it, but I've seen a Dedra Yellow do the exact same thing. I have seen a few other experiments with it, like Boba Yellow can do the same thing. That would be my current pick. The Sharky pick is pick Vader, but everybody else can pick whatever they want. But I think the red-yellow package from Villainy for that, in particular, if you're targeting Lando or Talzin or honestly even Luke, sometimes it works really well. If they don't have Cinta, you just exhaust Luke and then pull a card out of their hand and keep bashing away with something, whatever you got. The alternate Sharky pick is Kit Green, but I won't go too far into detail on that.
We'll save that for another video. All right. Kyle, what about you?
Well, I'll help you build Vader, because I just traded for a Vader showcase, so now I got to play it too. But
geez, now you have to play it.
I think the question we have to answer here is, and we've had this a lot in the past, is Lando going to be able to hold up as that top dog? And we mentioned it before, but there's a lot of decks that have popped up like this before. And I know, Mickey, you and I are Quinlan players. Once it had to be the top deck, it struggled a little bit there. Yeah. Is Lando going to struggle? Because there's obvious ways to try to answer it, and it's to try to answer those credits, right? So we'll see. I personally am never a fan of this is the new hotness and then being the person who plays the new hotness. So to try to answer your question here, Jordan, I don't think I would go on Lando right away, because I don't want to be playing the new hotness deck that people are trying to answer. I would try to, pivot a little bit from there. I think right now I would be looking at some of these space, well, maybe not space pilot decks, I guess, that people are going to be doing. Lando, I'm already talking myself out of it.
Having an identity crisis already.
Yeah, I'd be looking at aggro. I want to find a good aggro deck. I think I'd probably be playing a little bit more of the Chewy to see if I could aggro them down. Yeah, I do want to mess around with this Ularen. As you can see, I was excited about it before. But, if you look at, one of the things I like to look at is kind of public sentiment on what showcases people are buying. You can tell what is going to show up in some ways. And I just got 2 pieces of data for you, Jordan. The Lando showcase is now $80 list price average above market, meaning people are trying to sell them for a lot more all of a sudden. And the one on the opposite end of that for data-wise is Jin is $70 now list below market. So I think people have already said, all right, Jin's not it. It's Lando, and the prices are shifting in those ways.
I'm glad I picked my Lando showcase up last week.
Yeah, I actually traded for one on Friday. So
yeah.
all really working out well. So yeah, I think
cool
those are
looking
great
one.
points, and it really does come back to what Mickey mentioned about the pace in which people react. Right? Is Adepticon that sort of meta? I think I've never been to the Shark. You probably know more about what Adepticon is than us. Is it? I've heard it's mostly a
Mini-
figure convention.
Minis.
Adepticon
Minis,
is a miniature wargaming convention, so that there is a SWU tournament there is actually kind of a surprise to me, and that's kind of cool. But it is very focused on miniature wargaming. So
Yeah.
Oh, it's
that's
gonna
about
be
all I
it's
have
gonna
for it.
be serious business. Have you seen that mat? They were doing the math. There's only
Yeah.
gonna be a handful of these mats, and it's the
The Fear and
Vader.
Dead Man.
Oh
haven't
my
seen it. That's
goodness,
cool.
yeah. So like, I think people are gonna be like legit trying to win because that mat's gonna be a prize.
I believe it. It just that's
like
my
the-
experience of Adepticon is miniature wargaming.
It's
So.
like the Plo Koon Gen Con mat, but it's a cool mat.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a mat that people really want and stuff. So I'm excited to see what's going on there. And it's going to be sealed as well on 2
Yeah.
days, I believe. Right.
I
So,
believe it's 2 sealed events and 1 premiere event.
yeah, you're not going to
Yep.
go, Mickey. You're a lot closer
It's
than
close.
us. But not-
Unfortunately, my schedule did not line up, but I considered it. I heavily considered it. And that's kind of be the thing is I think that people that are going to be there are going to take it real seriously. It's just who's going to travel.
yeah, and it's that first weekend before PQs. Mickey, when's the first PQ that you're hitting up?
So I'm unsure. There is one on the 4th I could feasibly go to. The first one I'm certain I'm going to is on the 25th, the week after the Atlanta sector.
Nice. So stay away from Vegas, and it'll be good for me there. Okay. So great first or second weekend of this meta. Another great community event. Can't thank those guys enough. It was great to be a part of the broadcast. Had a great time casting with the whole crew. They do a great job with the streams, and if you haven't checked them out, you should. You're doing yourself a due service. So check out McClunky Gaming on YouTube and Twitch. And next time they're going live, be sure to watch it. So really excited there. I think we're getting off to a good foot in this meta. Like we're excited. There's new things. There's evolving things. We're going back from a couple weeks of Obi being unstoppable and upgrades on Revan to, hey, now we're getting to a little bit more of a defined meta where things are that we're looking out for week to week, whether it's credit, hate, this, that, or the other thing. So Mickey, thanks so much
Yeah.
for joining us. Always a great time to be able to chop it up. I think you always
Yeah.
mention it when you talk about what your favorite part of going to these events is, and it's getting to meet your friends and getting to chop it up. And for us, it's a treat to have you come and join us and give
Yes.
a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We
This
have
was a
somebody
great
on
time.
who knows what they're doing.
Give it a break. So you have your YouTube channel. I haven't posted a video in a while, but I'll put the link in the description, and we'll guilt you into publishing more. And Mickey and I have been talking about doing some stuff together too. So
Yes.
excited to look at that in the future. And that's all we got. We got midday matchup coming up on Friday. Kyle, anything special scheduled?
Well, I got a new showcase, so it will definitely be Vader. I just don't know what Vader's gonna be playing against, so we'll see.
Hopefully you'll be able to regain some pride and standing in your household this week. You can't lose 3 in a row. I know you went to Casa Bonita and had some drinking bets. I like drinking. I don't even drink, and I like drinking bets.
Yeah, maybe I'm not gonna give myself the heavily unfavored matchup for once. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know about for once. At least the past couple weeks, but I do not know about for once. And then on Friday night, we'll also be joining our buddies over at Late Night Gaming for some webcam games. I think that's called Late Night at Night or Late Night Past Jordan's Bedtime. Myself, Kyle, and Sharkey will be popping in and out depending on the time. So really looking forward to that as well. And then another look towards events next week with an Adepticon recap. And then next week after that, I'll be at a PQ. So we'll have some good stories there. So for Mickey, for Kyle, for Sharkey, I'm Jordan. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, stay tuned, stick with us, and we'll see you then. Bye.